Hello, hello, hello. Okay. Check, check. There we go. Now we've got some audio in. Super cool. Hello, hello. Okay. Good afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are on planet Earth. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky. We're going to make a painting today. We're going to make a painting by one of my favorite artists. And I say that every week because I'm always making paintings by my favorite artists. And as I said, today's no exception. The art that we're going to be making is by this artist, Molly Lamb Bobak. And she is a highly influential teacher of art, an artist herself. If you Google her name, the first thing that comes up is Molly Lamb teacher under the Google search there, which I think is kind of interesting at first. I was like, oh, that's kind of, well, actually, that's really kind of cool that she's maybe acknowledged for the contribution she's made through art education even more than her art. But anyway, she lived a long and productive life till the age of 94, I think painting up until the last few years of her life. And she was born in Vancouver, lived kind of the latter half of her life out on the east coast of Canada. And one of the signature achievements of her life was being the first woman that was accepted into Canada's War Artist Program, or the Canadian Forces Artist Program, as it's known today. And it's the same program that I was a part of that allowed me to go up to the North Pole with the Royal Canadian Air Force and fly in a fighter plane, again with the RCAF, and make landscape drawings going faster than the speed of sound. She was a part of the program during World War II, and we're going to look at some of her work here in a second. I just thought I'd show a little bit about her, just the Google page or the Wikipedia page here. I also thought this was interesting too. Of the 32 official members of the War Artist Program, she was the last surviving member until her death in 2014. So let's just take a quick little gander at some images. You'll recognize, I was going to say this was the image, but that's not the image we're going to paint today. One of the common themes in her art is crowds and large gatherings of people, which is, in 2020, just seems super, like, alien. I don't know when the last time I was in a big crowd, or I don't know about you guys, but that was one of the interests of her life and her practice, was the crowd and what crowds look like and how they behave, and kind of the swirling movement that it almost appears to be like a river or a stream. And so here's a bunch of her paintings, just kind of the images off of Google Images. Here's the Globe and Mail article talking about her obituary about 5-6 years ago. An image of her. Doesn't she look like a happy person? I was like, as soon as I saw it, I'm like, that's my kind of person. She looks like she's a real happy person. Earlier this year, there was a big exhibition at the Ottawa Art Gallery in Ottawa, Ontario. A Woman of the Crowd was the name of the title. And here's a link to kind of a longer, in-depth biography of her if you're really interested. One of the interesting things about her life, and that's maybe I'm just repeating some weird stuff off of Wikipedia, is that she grew up in the house of this fellow, and her mother was the maid to another family, and somehow her mother got pregnant, and so she. But what's interesting is that that family took her and her mother in. My understanding from reading between the lines is that the father of the house was also her father, and kind of unusually, this family embraced the other woman and their daughter, and raised them as one large family, which I think is kind of remarkable today, let alone 100 years ago. But let's just kind of zip down here past a few things. Here's some of, look at these. Well, this is Jack Shadbolt. Jack Shadbolt was one of her kind of main teachers at what was then called the Vancouver School of Art, and is now Emily Carr University, where I teach here in Vancouver. Here's a I think this is a self-portrait. No, this is a portrait by a friend of hers. I actually was maybe considering doing this actual portrait later on, although this might be a little bit complicated for our beginners painting class. But I love that painting. I think it's a really beautiful painting. Let's just take a quick look at some of her war art images. So these, she, as part of the War Artist program, before she only became part of the program in the last year of the war in 1945, despite the fact that she was making art throughout the entire war. And one of her champions was A.Y. Jackson, who was himself a war artist, but he was like, this person's pretty talented. Maybe we could get over some of our prejudices and let her just focus on making art rather than doing all the other things that she's doing while she's making art on the side. So I'm going to show some of these images, which I think are amazing. She's got a diary that she kept during the war, and these are some images in her diary. And what I think is, this is probably the coolest diary that I think I've ever seen. Not only, there's people who make drawings alongside of their images, and Van Gogh, whom we painted earlier, did some of that as well. But she actually sort of transformed her journal into small, like, newspaper pages. And so here's one of them. Here's another page. Like, she has sort of letters to the editor or letters from the editor in her journals. I don't know what her intent was with this. I don't think it was published during her life. So this is just her fun way of kind of illustrating her life and turning it into the news. I think these drawings are so cool. Look at these. Like, here's her getting her blood test and the people waiting in line. And then I think this is my favorite image. Private Lamb, that's her, has a quiet afternoon in the canteen. And here's her serving, probably doing waitress duty, as probably most women were relegated to kind of those type of roles during the war. But I just think this, she's having a quiet afternoon where she's surrounded by all of these these gentlemen in the canteen. She's certainly kind of popular there. What was another? Oh, there's plenty of images we can look at. Maybe just a few here. This is on the Canadian War Museum website of her art, and there's a number of really great close-ups where, here's her making her paintings in her studio when she shipped off to war. And one thing I just sort of thinking about, first of all, she's probably making some of these paintings, some of the sketches, very quickly. And you could tell that she's trying to capture a situation but she's not really thinking about photography in the way that when we take a photograph, we're trying to create a snapshot. They feel like, they don't feel like photographs. I don't feel like she was intending to make photographs. And I do think that's a really important distinction, particularly for beginner artists. A lot of beginner artists, painters, illustrators, drawers, have an idea that they want to make images that look like paintings. If they're going to draw people, it better look exactly like a photograph takes a picture of a person, or it is a bad artwork. And I just think that's a poisonous thought. I just think that's totally poison. If you're going to try to, especially in today, where we can take a photograph on our phones and so quickly, it is a reminder of what is the point of trying to make a drawing or a painting that looks exactly like a photograph. If you want a photograph, take a photograph. We're going to make paintings, right? And these paintings, you know, so some of the paintings have a little bit of an awkward quality. I mean, this is the bad example. I think this is a gorgeous image. And you can see, you know, if we were to try to make this painting, you can already see some of the underpainting underneath here, right? So you can see the evidence of the process she's using for this painting. And then these sketches, right? You just get the sense that she's drawing really quickly while all this is happening. And she's, you know, part of what was exciting for me about being part of the War Artist program is, just like it's saying here, the opportunity to kind of go behind the scenes and see parts of the military that most people don't even see, and in fact maybe even most military personnel don't see unless they're doing that particular job, like in this case the laundry, right? Somebody's got to clean all those sheets and clothes and socks and all that kind of stuff, right? So, you know, even like this image, you know, this is not how a photograph would take this person's image, but there's a lot of feeling and emotion in the way that this woman is walking through this place, which would have been hard to capture with a camera. I just think these are just gorgeous. These are just absolutely stunning. Where's another one that I really wanted to show here? Right, like, look at, I just think these are beautiful drawings. And again, I think another thing about when we allow ourselves to draw non-photographically, when we're not obsessed about perfection, that's when our own individual style starts to come out. And that is what as artists, what we're ultimately wanting. We want, you know, we take these classes and we're studying from all of these great painters, but we want ultimately to be able to draw and paint in our own way, and that requires us letting go of our desire to make things look perfect, because I don't know what that means. I don't even know what it means for myself, and every artist kind of struggles with that idea. Again, these big crowds, people celebrating the end of the war. Okay, so let's get right into it. This is the painting that we are going to create today. It's a little, whoops, of a wider painting. Let me see if I fit the whole thing in here. Now, obviously, I don't have such wide canvases, so like this is kind of like that's basically the entire painting here. I'm just gonna move this back a bit. So we're not gonna paint edge to edge. We're gonna, like we've been doing so far, we're gonna take parts of this picture and we're gonna create one picture. We're gonna kind of chop off a little bit on each side here. So let's get going here. Let's grab our materials. And so I've got my palette. I've got some canvas. Have I sanded that already? Might have to give that a quick little sand. As always, I'd just like to remind people that, especially if this is the very first time you're watching one of these episodes, I coated these. This is just a cheap canvas board from the dollar store for literally $1 or $1.25 or whatever it is, and then some gesso, which you can get for like $10 to $20 at your art supply store. Any kind of brand you want, as long as it's acrylic gesso. You want the acrylic gesso because we're painting with acrylic paint. You wouldn't want to use oil-based gesso and then paint acrylic over top of it, because that paint is just going to peel right off, like as if you're painting on glass. Which perhaps you might want to do. Maybe you want to be able to peel the paint off of the canvas. Although if that was what you wanted to do, you would actually be better suited to actually paint onto glass, because you're going to be able to peel it off a little bit more cleanly than if you were to paint on top of oil-based gesso. So I've got a couple of used rags. I like to recycle all these rags and use them until there's no paint or no way to use them anymore. And my brushes. Is that everything in here? Got a lot of rags in here because I've been cutting up some shirts that have seen better days. Okay. So, and this canvas, right here. So I coated it with gesso. I'm just going to take this block of 220 sandpaper, give it a quick sand. Okay, I'm just gonna look at that. That's all the stuff that's come off this here. Now you could wipe it with a little bit of a wet cloth in order to do what I just did, but since you want this to be as dry as possible before you start painting on it. So let's see, where should we begin? Okay, let's take a look at this painting again. And, I made myself a tea and then forgot to bring it down, because this is usually where I like to sip my tea and kind of think aloud. Okay, so, maybe first of all, well, I was going to say I was going to zoom in. Well, let's just see if I zoom in how the composition holds up. It's a little bit too tight. So if I'm going to clip off a little bit on either side, am I missing too much? I don't think even she would say that, that the painting is, a failure if this figure on the left gets cut out, right? And we're not going to paint everything super faithfully here, in case people are like, oh, I don't know. I mean, thought this was going to be one of the easy ones, and now I'm looking at it like, how am I going to do this guy and then this person here? Like, we're gonna be a little bit flexible as we go here, so don't worry. The first thing to do is we're going to draw on here the basic layout of this picture, and then we're going to put some washes down, and then we'll start building it up. So let's see. Let's get this view here. And okay. So to begin with, normally what we do, I like drawing a line right down the middle to find the center. I think in this case, we might as well just go right to this horizon line. And the horizon line is not right in the middle, right? So if this was the middle that we would normally do the line right down the middle, I'm just going to go... Actually, you know what? Let's do how we normally do it, just because I don't want to... It'll just make things easier for people. Right? Look at this. Look at that beautiful straight line. Okay, or not quite, right? So let's do, but it doesn't matter because we're not worried. This is just a guideline, right? And it's actually, I feel like I did a pretty good job of capturing the line that she had in her painting, right? Let's do another one. We're going to divide it in half. And my goodness, look at, I'm on a roll. Look at these straight lines. Okay, so that would be the middle of this painting, which is probably somewhere right about here, right? So we're just going to go down a little bit. You know, there's like a thumb down here. And, you know, if you wanted, you could go even lower, right? Because let's say you're like, well, there's a lot of people. How many people do I want to paint down there? One way you could do this is just by shrinking the landscape down a little bit to give yourself less room for people to be, and then focus more on the sky. You know, it's totally up to you. I wouldn't say there's a right or wrong way to do this. I am just going to back this back up. Okay. And then I'm going to get rid of my initial midway line, right? So the original midway point is about here, and this is now my horizon line. So, let me see, as I think about how to make this painting. So, let's just sort of take a second to think about the process that she would have used to painting this picture. And it's a little bit hard to see. It looks like the first thing I notice is it looks like she might have done the sky after the ground, right? It looks like she painted the ground, and then it might have even looked like the ground was much higher. Like, can you see a little bit of this green coming through? Instead, it looks like she might have painted the sky higher, and then decided to lower down the sky and lower the horizon down a bit. And so that's why it looks like this blue is going over top of that, which is kind of, it's pretty bold. Like, that's a pretty bold brushstroke, because she didn't bother making it really tidy and clean, as many other people would really fuss over this. She's just like, right across. That takes a lot of courage to do something like that. Sorry, I'm just also looking here in the chat. I just see Sue says, I'm going to try painting this on a mixed media greeting card. Will it work? Worried about it curling up. And then Deborah says, I think that will be okay, Sue. I have been painting on mixed media pad and it has been fine. I do, though, tape around the edge so that the paint will not run. And then Donna says, I'm not painting tonight, second day of changing our rooms to the front of the house. I didn't realize how much smaller the new room is from the other room, but I want the natural light. Ooh, that's a good idea. Natural light makes all the difference. But to go back to this idea of the paper, you could, if you wanted, you know, if I was, let's say I wanted to paint onto, I'll just kind of take a quick little detour for a second here. You know, here's just a regular, well, it's not a regular piece of paper. It's a little bit thicker than your photocopy paper, right? If I was going to, if I really wanted to paint on this and make, and what I would do is get some tape, probably masking tape, although I don't know if it would make too much of a difference if it was like your packing tape, and just kind of tape it down if you can, so that if it gets wet and it starts to wrinkle, which it will, the tape is just going to help resist. It's like, oh, the paper wants to stretch and pull, and the tape is kind of keeping it in its form as much as possible, right? So that even when it shrinks and buckles, it's going to buckle, but not as dramatically as it might otherwise, right? So if you could tape it down to a table or a piece of wood, obviously you want to make sure you don't, you know, if the table's got a finish on it, the paint might kind of strip the finish. Anyway, sorry. So we'll go back to this painting here. So I think what we want to do, we'll sort of continue using some of the things that we've been doing so far, which is to paint our cooler color which I think we'll do in the sky, and then a warmer color in the grass as underpaintings. And then from there, we can kind of start having some fun with the colors we put over top of it. And I'm wondering, you know what, let's do a little bit of drawing. Like, part of me thinks like, oh, you know what, let's just attack this and let's just go. And then that's probably how, if I was to paint this completely on my own, but that might be a little bit of a, might terrify especially some of the beginners out there. So I think it wouldn't hurt to just try drawing a few of these figures down here. And so what I would do, and oops, let's get this view, actually, let's get this view here. And I think, well, I'll draw one zoomed out and then I'll draw one zoomed in. So let's say I'm going to draw a person here. I might even make them a little bit bigger. Right, I'm going to draw like a square, a rectangle. And here's some legs. And then a head. And some arms. Right? So let's do this. I'm going to do it again, but I'm going to zoom right in. And let's imagine, and I'm not drawing anyone specific here, I'm just drawing, let's do another one. Maybe they're holding hands and moving this way. Okay. So let's do a few more of these. So these are going to be the biggest people in our landscape. Everyone else is going to be smaller, right? Because we don't want somebody the same size back here. Otherwise, it's going to make for an odd composition, right? It's going to play with the space in a way that it could be a little bit odd. So let's just kind of keep on going here. Let's make another one here. Another person. Right, that might even be a little bit big, so I can make it a little bit, this one maybe a little smaller. So pretty simple kind of people, right? We don't want to overcomplicate all of this. So I think what we can do is we'll just kind of keep these as reference. We can even paint over top of them. But it might just, so you can, or you know what, maybe let's do a couple of just slightly smaller people here so we have the size of this space. So let's do another one back here. It's a little bit smaller even. And then back here, right, so we can see how small these people are, right? So if there's somebody back up here, they're going to be that big, right? So we can see how these sizes are. And I think that this might be kind of helpful, right? We've got, let's say we got some of these little kids here running after, and actually let's draw a few of these kites. I like this big blue one up here. Right. I may even look up some of these shapes later on, but let's see if we can find, because these are pretty abstract kites, right? The Great Kite Festival is the name of this painting. So this is probably the in terms of all of the compositions we've done, the loosest one, right? I mean, we don't really need to put too much more here, because as we get going, we can actually have some fun just randomly putting things. And you can even see in her image, there's a few places where she's painted some, it looks like some of the kites right out, because she might have felt like, you know what, there's too many here. Okay. So, let's get to painting here. So the colors that we want are, I think we're probably going to use most of the colors in our color wheel today. So I'm going to put out a little bit of each color. Not too much, because I don't want to waste any paint, because I don't, off the top of my head, know which colors I need a lot of or which ones I barely need any of. So I'm not even going to, I'm not going to put too much of each color until I just see what I need here. So the amount of paint that I'm putting on here is about as much as I put on my toothbrush. In fact, I mean, that's really how much you want to put on there. There's some of these are if I have a really, really dirty teeth and I need a lot of toothpaste. That kind of looks like what I'm doing here, but okay. She does have some black in this painting. So do we want to use, let's use a little bit of black, I guess. I try to avoid using black as much as possible just because of how dominant it is. But we'll put some in here. And we need some white. So all of the colors that we own, we're putting in here. Whether we use a little dab or all of them remains to be seen. So this is, again, tea break here. Shelly McCool says it's a perfect night to be painting. It's snowing and blowing outside. Oh my goodness. I haven't actually been outside today. I was teaching this morning, and then I was grading, and then I am, and then here I am now here. So I haven't opened a door, breathed fresh air at all. Okay, so I have no idea. I mean, the whole universe could be on fire right now, and you know. Okay, so we're gonna put down a wash on here, and let's mix some of this color here. So for the sky, what I'm going to do is, you know, I sort of, at this point, because we can make some change, we can reproduce her painting exactly as it is, or we can kind of make some changes. We can change the time of day of the painting. We can make it evening or morning or nighttime if you want. All of those are possibilities. I'm going to say I'm going to try to get as close to this as possible. So I think to begin with, if this is ultimately going to be a cool blue, so then what color do we want to put underneath here? So if we're going to have like a cool blue, baby blue sky, then we can put another color underneath here, ideally a cool color. So probably we could go with like a cool yellow, or we could do a cool red if we wanted a bit more of a evening kind of sunset-y kind of vibe. But let's go for like a pretty cool yellow, but with maybe a lot of white in it. Okay, so I'm going to scoop a bunch of that white out. And let's going to grab a little bit of yellow, and let's mix it in here. And I'm also going to take some water and just kind of dilute it a little bit. Okay. And then let's just cover this whole thing. So if we wanted to do something like, let's say, often towards the ground, we tend to the sun, because of the atmosphere, tends to warm up a little bit. Like the higher we go, kind of the cooler the sky can become. And often it gets warmer as we get down here. So, for instance, what we could do is just take a little bit of the warm yellow and mix it in here. And this is going to be kind of barely noticeable. Alright, but we could take a little bit of that color and put this down here. Maybe I need a little bit more of it, in fact. Oh. Got paint on my finger there. Okay, so I'm just going to paint this little bit of a warmer stripe of yellow down here. So I am departing a little bit from her painting, just to kind of introduce a little bit of a slightly different kind of concept. All right, so just while we're at it here. So we have a little bit of a warmer yellow, and then I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this, take this same paint that I've got on here. I'm going to take this yellow and just taking more of it, getting some water. So this is my warm yellow. And then I'm going to paint this warm yellow all the way down here. So there's a little bit of white in there, not too much. And this is, you can see now there's pretty much just straight out of the tube yellow. This is going to help push the landscape closer to us. And give this bottom part of the painting a bit more warmth, regardless of whatever color we end up painting there. Okay. So we've got like warm yellow, and then we've got cool and warm yellow, and with a little bit of, with white obviously, and then white and cool yellow up top there. So kind of three sections of paint really. And now that's going to take a couple of minutes to dry here. So while that's drying, we can start thinking about how we're going to paint some of these people. And probably should have painted this first because that's where I want to paint first, but Donna says, "I'm so glad I follow your classes. I've learned so much. It amazes me." Thank you so much for that's so sweet of you. You know, me doing these classes teaches me a lot of stuff, or it helps me realize what I know that I don't sometimes. I was telling some of my students on Monday because someone had mentioned to them, that they'd overheard somebody say that a BFA, or a Bachelor of Fine Arts, another way to say it would be, and is a Bachelor of F all. I graduated from art school and I know nothing, right? I got this degree and it's worthless. And it can kind of feel like that because you're sometimes like, I don't know how to repair a fridge. I don't know how to do surgery. I don't know how to, water plants. Like, what skill do I have? What value do I have? Can I contribute to my community? And sometimes it's like through the act of teaching where you realize, like, oh, there's a bunch of stuff here that I know how to do that never really occurred to me that I can show people some of this stuff, the stuff that people actually want to know. And part of that is being able to look at a painting and to be able to start to kind of decode the process of the painter, or to be able to understand how they did it and how you might want to change or approach it slightly differently. And part of that comes from taking classes like mine or any other class, but it also comes to just doing it yourself, right? The more that you're experimenting with the materials and trying to paint, I think it's always surprising. You kind of like, oh, it didn't even occur to me how much I actually know how to do until I started doing it. Okay. So I'm looking this. I tend to find like white paint is the slowest of the paints to dry. So it's not surprising to me that this area where there's not only white paint, but I kind of painted all of this and then came back over with more paint, that area is still quite wet. So, which is actually going to be, because I already see down here the ground is starting to dry a bit faster, which is not surprising because there's less white inside of it. And it's also, I think, going to work well because she clearly painted her sky amongst one of the final things in her picture here. And it begs the question of like how we're going to, if we should use a really big brush, or we should, and I think actually for all of this is, especially when we've got a painting like this, so it's got a lot of detail, is one of the questions would be, do I paint the details first and then the big area around it, or do I paint the big area first and then do the details? And there's no simple answer to that, and there's no right or wrong way to that either, because there's plenty of artists, including Molly Lamb Bobak, who looks like a few different times in her career made different choices. So it looks like in this painting she has certainly painted, well, it looks like she actually may have painted some of the kites first, and then she didn't like them and then painted them out, and then came back and put those kites on last, right? So that might have been how she approached this painting. It also looks like down here that she painted this green, which we're just about to do here. I'm just waiting a couple seconds. It looks like she painted this green and then painted a bunch of the people over top of it, let that dry, and then came back with this lighter green and even some of this green here and painted around some of the people. So there's a few, so she's going back and forth. So often that question is like, which one do I do first and second, is sort of like, well, which one do I do first and then second and then third and then fourth and then fifth and then sixth? It's not necessarily always 1, 2. Often it's this kind of weaving, right, and that actually creates a more interesting picture because there's that kind of level of complexity. Okay, so this is almost dry here. Maybe while it's drying, I'm going to start mixing that paint that's going to go there because I'm almost ready to work it. Okay, so what we're going to need for the ground, we're going to mix we're going to mix a warm green. So I'm going to need, my warm yellow and my warm blue, right? And maybe we can even look at our color wheel, and you can kind of think about like, well, what kind of green do I want, right? I think these kind of greens here could work, but this would kind of be stuff that we might want to put in the background because they're so cool that they are going to want to go backwards. So we don't want to put that in the foreground. What we might want to do is use maybe one of these kind of colors, any kind of combination thereof, because they're going to come forward, and so then it becomes like, how intense of a color do we want? Now the warm yellow and the warm blue are pretty close to opposite from one another on the color wheel. So if we use this color, it's going to be, especially, half and half, pretty like grayish brown. So that might, now that I'm looking at it and I'm thinking about it, which is one of the reasons why it's good to have one of these, I think to myself, well, that is a pretty, like I was gonna say dead. Well, it is kind of, it's a desaturated color, right? If I mix this color, there's not going to be a lot of like energy in that color. But instead, if I look at the warm yellow and the cool blue, right? I kind of like, this is a little bit brighter than her color. But I kind of like a little bit brighter colors personally. So it's kind of tough. I'm thinking to myself, okay, so another thing I'm thinking about, as I look at this picture, having said all of what I just said, one thing that makes this painting really work is all of the bright colors on all this clothing. And if I paint the grass bright, then it's going to make it's going to compete with the colors on the people's clothes, right? Which may or may not be a bad thing. There's no judgment about that, but just that one thing that makes colors pop is their relationship to the colors around them, right? So some of these really nice, like the pinks and the yellows and the reds, those colors are really nice and saturated because they're surrounded by a relatively muted green. So, I'm just doing all this thinking out loud as I'm painting, or about to paint. So, I think what I am going to do is go back to this little bit more of a desaturated green by using the warm yellow and the warm blue. And I'm going to put that, looks like I've got this in the foreground here. So we'll mix it and we'll just see what it looks like. And if we don't like it, then we've got a nice rag. I can wipe it right off and we'll put a different color there. So let's just do a little test. So I'm going to take a bit of blue, not too much, because this is going to change that yellow pretty quickly, and mix this together. And if I look at this, where am I? That actually looks pretty close. So it's one of those things, sometimes things look different on the palette or in our idea, in our mind. Now keep in mind that I already have this warm yellow painted as my undercolor. So you can see how kind of, I don't know how it shows up on the camera, but this is a fairly muted green, right? It almost looks like I put some white or something in there, right? There's not, like, it feels like it's if I look at my color wheel, you know, it's pretty close to this neutral core. So just being mindful of that. So let's just take a look at what happens when I brush this over here. That's a pretty, you know, dark color. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to change a little bit, and let's get a little bit more warm yellow. And I'm going to take some cool blue this time. And let's try this over here. Now, wow, look at the difference in that color. And I think I want mine to be a little bit closer to this. So you can see the difference between these colors, right? And that's not even... So this is a little bit further away from the neutral core. It's certainly not like a lemon yellow, but it's also not as neutral as kind of gray as the other colors. So I'm going to put this in here. And you can see I can kind of also brush out the previous color. And I'm just going to go right up to the horizon here. Now, with the way that she's painted her picture, you can see that she's not concerned about making this a nice, smooth, flat kind of color. Like, she doesn't mind some of this brushiness that I've got in my painting. So I'm going to try to embrace a little bit of that. So I'm brushing it in, but I also haven't put like loads of paint on there. You can see most of the figures have now disappeared a little bit. But I'm pretty happy with the way this looks so far. Right? Now, if I was painting somebody else's painting, I might want a really smooth color, like the way that I applied the sky, right? Pretty kind of smooth paint in there, right? We don't see all the brush strokes in here. It's kind of, everything's kind of hidden. So, different kind of approach. This is my underpainting. This is the second coat of paint, and we're going to do a little third one a little bit later when I come back around, maybe up here. Okay. Cool, now the painting is starting to take some shape. And I can imagine some people finding it very hard to let the painting look like this. Like some people, this is just the way they paint. They're just like, blah, 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 blah. And then there's some people who are like, oh my goodness, look at all of these wayward, I can see all these brush strokes. Oh, it drives me crazy. So, you know, if you paint your painting however you want, right? If you want something that's a little bit cleaner and sharper of an image, there's no, you know, this is not an exam. You can feel free to approach it however you like. Okay, so now let's paint some of these people in here. And we can do a little bit of this while the paint is still wet too, because it's almost like these people, the black or the dark color that she's put down there, she paints over top of that as well anyway. So just making sure this brush is clean and not all gummied up and dry. So I'm looking for a paintbrush that I can use. I'm not going to use my smallest brush that I have. But I want a small one. Alright, so one of the smaller ones. And often, especially with these cheap brushes, right? So I'm using the same brushes that maybe you are using, right? I bought all of these brushes. These are two All of these brushes are from 2 different sets of brushes that I got at 2 different art supply stores. I think that the links are in the description. So one thing, if I'm using kind of these lesser expensive brushes, sometimes I'll just kind of just pull gently, not yank, but just sometimes there's a little bit of the bristles that come out on them. And I'd rather they come out in my fingers now than while I'm painting. Anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix a color. Now I could just use the black, but as you know, if you've watched a few of these episodes, I want a little bit more variety in my black. So I'm going to take some black, and I'm going to take a good healthy scoop of blue here, just so that that black is just not a pure black, but just got a little bit of energy in there. It's going to be probably totally unnoticeable by most people, which is why if you just paint with black, it'll be totally fine. But it's just my tick, is that I don't want a solid area. I'd love to have a little bit more life in there. Now, it's probably hard to see. I can still see a few of these figures in here. The penciled lines I put in there are going to start to surface more and more and more as the paint dries, and as that water in the paint evaporates. It's going to be a little bit more transparent. So I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to paint a few of these people in here, just like she did here. And I don't have to worry about making it perfect either. I think this person was a bit taller the first time around, but and because I'm going to paint some green afterwards, I don't, around some of these figures, I don't have to worry about making this too perfect either. All right. So let's look at her painting again here. So remember, now that I've established the size of these people, and I've actually shrunk them down a little bit from that no one behind them can be bigger than these people. Otherwise, it's going to look really weird. So you can even kind of think, okay, how big is that? It's a fingernail or something. Then this person needs to be smaller. And I'm going to paint colors over top of these folks anyway, right? So I'm just going to kind of get a bunch of them in here. Now, I don't want everybody to be standing looking at the camera, right? If I paint every single one of these images exactly like this, it's going to look like I'm a photographer standing on a scaffold and going, okay, everybody, on the count of 3, say, like, cheese, right? Because everyone's getting a group photo, right? That's probably not what she was intending in this picture. She's probably trying to create, this is a kite festival, so all these people kind of minding their own business, probably looking at the kites rather than me painting them or taking their photograph. So I don't want everybody standing like this. I want some people like pointing, crouching, or any kind of other look here. So let's do a few more where we got some people pointing up. Right, so maybe we have a few people here pointing this way. So as I'm going back, they're getting smaller and smaller. Maybe somebody looking up. Right, and I can also get, I don't have to do all of these people. I want to start now getting some people closer together. Right, because right now everyone is socially distancing pretty well, right? Everyone's in their own little bubble. So if this was a 2020 painting, then so far we're doing a pretty good job, right? But let's imagine this is 2021, when hopefully things have changed, right? And we're no longer having to socially distance. Well, let's start putting some people a little bit closer to one another, right? So we can now, we can even like overlap them a little bit. All right, so we can have and you might say like, oh, now this is starting to get a little bit confusing. Well, we're going to come back and put other paint on top of this shortly, so we don't have to worry about making it too comprehensible at the moment. Right? We can just have fun just sort of putting a bunch of people in here, and this takes a little bit of time. Right? Maybe these are little kids, so you might want to have some very small little, like this is just hardly even recognizable as a person, right? There's like, you know, parents with their kids holding their hands, right? Always remember to be trying to keep the size so that things are getting smaller as they go. Similarly, if you put something too small up front, then it's immediately going to make that look like some kind of a person. Or not a person, like a child, I mean. So some of these people have their hands and arms out, and some of them don't. Right, because they're facing in different directions. Like, let's say some of them we just have one leg. And if you make a mistake and you make somebody too big in one area of the painting, then just fix it by, like, let's say I put somebody too big right here. Right, they're a little bit too tall here. So instead, if I make a little mistake, then let's just kind of fix it with adding more. We're going to put like a crowd of people right here. And then later on, when I start adding some details to it, I can sort that out. Right, so there's this little crowd. So it's just a matter of now just doing more and more and more of these people. Yeah, you can stop at whatever point you like. You know, you don't have to have 30, 40 people in here. You could have 5 people in here, or 10 people, or no people at all. Maybe you could draw a dog running through here. I'm gonna put up just a few people who are even smaller back here. So that the size of these people really helps show the distance and the space in this picture. And, you know, and actually, the more I'm looking at this, I see plenty of places where now that I see it, she's painted some people right out. But she hasn't completely painted them out. Like, some people are there, but in kind of like, they're almost like little, like, not ghosts, but like after images. Or I think a lot about that in drawing. Sometimes you might want to do that to create the look of I think I'm gonna need to make these 2 figures bigger because I've made some of the people next to them too small. So just lengthening their limbs a bit. Like, so sorry, what I was meaning to say is, if you think about like the Impressionists, and we think like it's not about a snapshot in time, it's the impression of a event or a situation. So you often see like a parade that again looks just like Molly Lamb here, of sort of this swirling movement of people, and it's like a time-lapse photograph where a lot of stuff is kind of happening all at once. Like the whole parade is happening in the span of in that painting. Okay, so I think that might be, you know, I could obviously go and continue going on and on and on and on here, but that might be enough for our purpose right now. It looks like there's plenty of people having fun here. Although, you know what, I do want to have a few more, like another cluster. Like, we've got a few clusters of people. And at some point, this just becomes a bit of a blob, right? And I can also, you know, part of this too, by me doing these kind of little clusters, sometimes, you know, you're like, oh, I really like the way I did this one little stick figure. Oh, and then you're like, no, I don't want to touch it with other paint. It could ruin that little, and then it's like, you know what? It's just a tiny little stick figure. And part of it, you know, it might look weird just floating all by itself there. So that's a little better. I'm happy with this. So I'm going to wash my brush here. Before I forget, I haven't created the thumbnail for it, but this Saturday I'm going to be doing another episode where I'm just talking about the work that you guys have made. So if you want to send me any of your images on any of the paintings that you've made, so, well, the most recent 10, so from we ended with Van Gogh last time. Let me see. So, from Morandi forward. So, Morandi, Emily Carr, Miro, Kahlo, Birchfield, Ophelia, Hockney, Herring, Cassatt, Katz, and Warhol. So any of those paintings, if you haven't sent them to me or you haven't even done them yet, you've got a few days to work on them and to send them to me, and then on Saturday we'll do I'll talk about your work. And it seemed like the first time I did that this past Saturday worked out really well. It went twice as long as I thought it would be because I got really excited talking about your guys' paintings, but that's a good thing, right? Okay, so I've got that black there, and I think I'm going to wait to paint that black just because it's still quite wet. So I'm going to wait a second here, and let's paint the sky. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use some cool blue and some white. So I need a little bit more white. And with this, I'm going to go to my largest brush, right, that I have with this set that I got. So it's a bit of a bigger brush. And I've got my blue and my white. Those are the two colors that I'm going to use. So let's I'm going to get this white right here. I just want to make sure that I'm going to be careful not to get any black or yellow. I could get a little bit of yellow in there, but I do have this yellow that's already down here first. So let's see what that color looks like to start out with. That's pretty good, but still very... Well, actually, now that I'm looking at it, let's take a look. Well, you know, I was going to say... So, let's just see how this works. Actually, I'm glad I didn't put more blue in there, because this is, I think, the color that I want. So, you can see in my palette, I haven't fully, completely mixed that blue in. Because neither did she, right? She's allowing some of the paint to kind of, some of the parts of the paint that haven't been fully mixed together to kind of come through a bit. So I kind of want a little bit of that. In fact, I even feel like I'm mixing too much as I'm painting this, but I think we'll go back over top of it in a moment here. Okay. You can see I'm doing a little bit of the same sort of thing where I've got my, it's maybe hard to see, but I'm brushing a little bit more paint right over the horizon. Some of the horizon shows through. I'm going to use another green later on. That feels pretty good. Now, there is a bit of white showing through in the clouds. Potentially we may want to wait for this paint to dry, but let's just take a second here. I'm going to actually take a rag, just take off a lot of the paint. I'm not going to wash my brush because I don't want any water on here. Let's just see what happens if I take some white right out of the tube and get that shadow out of the way, and paint a little bit of that right in here. So I'm kind of just applying it and then brushing it into the picture a little bit. And so it's up to you how, you know, obvious you want these, let's say, clouds to be. Like how, you know, because you could see, was maybe a little bit, I'm maybe a little bit more timid than she was, right? She's a little bit fearless with doing this. So I'm going to take her inspiration, and I'm going to take even more white. It's really hard just to let a big blob of white float in the sky like that. Like you're just like, oh, it's just sitting there, oh, all by itself. Oh, I don't know if I can just let it do it like that. All right, so I mean, I find it hard. I can't imagine anybody else. I don't want to get too close to the ground there, but. And the other thing too is what's happening is the paint. There's so much wet paint on here that even if I want some of that juicier kind of quality, it's just mixing into the wet paint a little bit. So I think I'm going to let this dry and then come back and try to get more of that on there a little bit in a moment, right? So I'm just going to clean my brush off. And it looks like a lot of this black down here is dry, and we can start painting over top of it. Okay. Okay, so now one of the things we're going to have to do pretty much with any of the colors we apply over top of this black is add a little bit of white in there. We can do a few without any white at all, but I think what's going to happen is this black is just going to absorb that color. So we can just do a few tests. I'm going to go to, I think I'm going to actually use my smallest brush for this, because I want a little bit more accuracy as I go here. So let's, we can just pick any color here, but why don't we go for, let's take this red. It's going to take some red right out of the tube. And let's just see. So I would want to try to avoid any wet spaces here. Now if I paint, I'm not sure how it's showing up on the screen. It's okay, but that black is really absorbing this red. Whereas if I get a little bit of white on here, let's just see if I paint right in here. Right now, this pops. Right? You could also see that she left a little bit of like a black halo around a lot of these figures. Like she didn't paint right up to them. She left right to the edges. She left a little bit on either side. And what's fun now is I can take the same color that I've got and I can, put it in a bunch of different places. And you kind of want to distribute it around the picture so that we don't have a whole bunch of people wearing red or pink in one part. Right, we change people's pants. And I would just do this randomly. Like I'm not gonna really refer to her painting. Be like, oh, you know what? I need a red child right there. Like Here's her original painting. Especially right now, I'm just going to fill this in. I'm just going to start taking some colors, and I can have a lot of fun mixing some colors together. So let's make a purple, a little bit of white to it. If I wanted a better purple, I would use these two, so I can do that too, but and I can also, well, you know what, the sky is really wet, so I think I want to paint some of these, whatchamacallits, kites up there, but I have to just wait a few minutes here. So now in these areas where there's sort of big blobs, I can now kind of paint in here and redefine them a bit. And, you know, you can paint a little bit of one color. Let's say, you know, not everybody wears clothes that are one solid color. You know, often people have clothes that have stripes or dots or logos, all those kind of things. So, however you want, or even some t-shirts. So we're just going to keep building this up. And don't worry about, you know, you're like, oh, I just realized there's too many of this color here. Just keep on going. Just get all that paint that's off of your brush onto the canvas. And then we can always change the colors. In fact, it'll be kind of nice to then paint a little bit of a different color over top later on, because it's going to create some more variety. So now I'm just mixing a slightly different red. Maybe this one's be a little bit more of a, this is the cool red, a little bit more of a pink color. There's a little bit of black still. That one's still drying. Okay. So I'm just going to keep on going here. I'm going to take some blue. Just a little bit of white. So this cool blue. And you can make this as colorful of a picture as you like. You can tone it down if you want. You can make it like super multicolored with just tons of color in there. I'm going to take the same color and I'm going to add a little bit of a darker blue to it. Just because I want a little bit more variety in these colors. Got a lot of people wearing blue jeans here, so I might want to have some khakis and or dresses too, and skirts. I mean, who knows what time of year this is supposed to be. You know, if it's a pretty windy day, I don't know how many people are going to want to be walking around in a short skirt, right? People are probably bundled up a little bit. If it's such a windy day that we can fly kites all over the place. Okay, so I got a bunch of these. Let's add a little bit of yellow in here. Get green. So this green is going to be more of that bright lemon yellow, and adding just a little bit of white in there so it pops against the black. Now, what would be really fun about this situation if you were actually painting it in person is you could look at somebody off in the horizon and say, "Oh, I really like that color or that jacket. I'm gonna see if I can kind of recreate a little bit of that on my painting." Here, I'm working from her painting, so it's a little bit harder to kind of add that variety in here, but we'll get it. I think we'll do a pretty good job. I'm pretty confident how things are going so far. You notice I'm not washing my brush much. I'm allowing the paint to get kind of dirty and mixing it up as I go. Okay. I am sometimes wiping the paint off my brush, but next, what I think I want to do is I want to get some kind of browns and stuff. So I'm going to take some yellow and just put this right into a previous mixture of my purple here and get kind of a brown, gray color. So this is a bit of a muddy kind of color, but I think this color was going to work in a few different places, particularly for like maybe some pants. And again, like some of these are big blobs, and I can change some of those blobs to different colors if I want. I'm going to paint some green under there later on. Okay, so one thing right now, like everything feels a little bit of the same color. So I've got way too many of the same colors. So now I can start kind of modifying and making things even more specific. A few things that I don't have either. I don't have any kind of just pure white on the canvas. Right, so I'm going to take some white and put that in a few places. Some white here. So I look for some places where I see too much of the same color. Okay. I think what I need is some orange. A bit of white. Where are some places here? So I'll keep on going. I think the other thing too is once some of these, like I painted black, and that black soaks up all the color. So I can wait for some of this to dry, and then once it's dry, I can then go and paint other colors back over top of them. So some of like the pure red and yellow right out of the tube won't really work very well against that black. They're just going to get soaked right up. So by putting a bit of another color, especially a color that's got a bit of white in it, down, then it's going to allow me that opportunity to go back and put another color over top of it once it dries. Okay. See, my sky is still very much wet. What's another color? Okay. Need a bit more orange. Right, it slowly starts coming together. Like, there's times where I look at the paintings I'm working on, like, oh my goodness, I don't know about this. And then, you know, sometimes it just takes a little bit of patience, and then it comes together. You're like, oh, actually, I'm really happy with this painting. I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but one of my favorite metaphors, I talk about this in my classes all the time, so forgive me if I repeat myself, but I always think of the painting process as a roller coaster that goes up and down, up and down, up and down, right? And there are times when you're making a painting where you're just sort of looking at it, you're like, I don't know, what a disaster. That was just garbage. What am I doing with myself? And then I think, okay, I'm on the bottom, or depending on the way you want to talk about, like, I'm on the top of the roller coaster, and I'm going down the hill, and I'm like, oh, this is too much, I'm gonna barf, and then come down, and then I'm like, whoa, actually, I got this. It's turning pretty good, looking good. Then we start going up the ramp, and it's like feeling more and more confident. Things are going great, and then you're like, oh no, I'm barely holding on. This is a nightmare. Why did I put that brush stroke there? And then I should just give up entirely. Why did I think I should be painting? This is, I'm a fool. And then we're going back up. We're like, oh, looks like and if you really understand that is the way every single artist feels, the way every single painting that has ever been made by every human who's ever made a painting, and you realize that is the common pattern of the process of creation of every painting, then it's not shocking when it doesn't happen to you. If anything, if you're painting away and everything's going great, you may want to just, like, in the back of your mind thinking, okay, I'm waiting for the roller coaster to go down, because it's just been going up, and the more it goes up, the more I start thinking, like, oh, we're getting pretty high here. So I'm just anticipating when that moment will happen. And so when it happens, I'm not surprised, I'm not angry, or I'm just like, there it is. I knew it. I knew I was going to get that surprise sooner or later. So if you go into it knowing that you're going to get surprised, when you are surprised, it's still frustrating, but you're like, it's not that, it's just like, oh, okay, that's just inevitable kind of part of the process. So anyway, I digress. What I want to do is I'm going to paint some skin tone in here, all right? Because we got all these people, and so we're going to I'm assuming they're not all wearing face masks and hoodies, right? Especially when they're, you know, well, some of these people in these clusters maybe should be wearing masks. Okay, so to make a skin tone, what we want is we want the warm yellow, and maybe I'm just going to use a slightly bigger brush to mix this, even though I may not use the brush for actual painting. So I'm going to take my warm yellow. I'm going to take my warm red. I'll need a little bit more of that. That's maybe a lot. Those colors change a lot when you. And then I'm going to take some warm blue, if I can get any. There we go. I'm going to mix these together. Right, so then I start getting a brown. Look at that nice, beautiful brown. All right. So there's going to be some people who will have this skin color right out of the gate. Oh, right, so I've got this here. Let's take it and put it on a few places. So this could be for people's, brown hair or brown skin. So you can put this on their hands. All right. As I paint it on some of these black surfaces, it's looking a little bit more orangey. The black is kind of transforming that color a little bit. All right. So I'm going to take a little bit of white, and that white is just going to kind of lighten this color up a little bit. And I'm just going to continue now. Right, I'm almost painting on almost all of these faces that color. And then I'm going to take even more white. Right. And right now, just that little dot, and it kind of looks like they're looking at one another. So you might actually find it easier to paint some of these lighter skin tones and then go back and darken them later, just because that painting right on the black just sucks up so much color that it makes it kind of tricky to do this. So okay. Sorry, here's the original. Sorry, it's been off the screen for a little while. So look, we're doing pretty good. We're doing pretty good. The sky is almost dry, just in a few places where I painted the white, where it's still kind of wet, but we're motoring on, I think, at a pretty good pace. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to still take this, I'm going to do a few kind of a little bit darker tones here, so some kind of grays. So I'm taking this brown. I'm going to add just a little bit of blue. Oh, that's a little too much. Let's come back and add that white in here, so we have kind of a darker brown that I can use for some skin tones as well. So again, this allows me just to have a kind of nice diverse crowd, but also you know, people are going to have different, we're going to have different hair colors and stuff too, so you don't want a whole bunch of white heads or brown heads or whatever skin color you want to put on there, because otherwise then you won't, it'll just look like everyone's got their heads shaved, which would be also very odd. She's also, it looks like, done a few things where she's got very pinkish kind of colors here, so I'm just going to... You also want to think that people are might be wearing hats, you know, baseball hats or toques or anything to kind of keep warm. Okay. So it's the slow buildup of color and detail that really is going to make this painting work. So adding just like little bits of the same color to different people so that you don't just have a purple person and a blue person and a green person, but, you know, people have backpacks and they got, you know, said hats and umbrellas and canes and, you know, khaki pants and blue jeans and, you know, so you want the more variety possible is going to create a more distinctive kind of environment here, or a believable kind of space. I really like, there's this fellow in her painting with that red striped shirt, and I'm going to put that guy right up front here, or a white shirt with a couple of red stripes on the left side, so I want to make sure I capture them. Okay, so it looks like I might be ready to paint some of the kites in the sky here. And because this is I'm not painting on black, I've got a pretty light colored sky, so I can get away with painting some colors directly on there and not really needing much white, if any at all. So let's go for that blue kite up there. So I like this. I just want to make sure I don't get my hand over any of this wet paint down here. You know what, I'm going to switch to my smaller brush here. And I'm going to rotate the canvas around. Okay, there's one, and I can add some colors to it later on if I like, but what else? Let's put... I'm actually just going to clean this brush because I only want to have maybe 5 or 6 kites in the sky, and I don't want them to all be the exact same color, so I'll make sure there's enough variety in here. Let's get a red. You know, she's got these very simple shapes up there. And, you know what, I personally am a little bit worried that my shapes are just going to look like blobs floating in the sky. So I'm going to take a second to Google kite. Ah! I don't want to go to kites.com. I want... There we go. Okay. So you know what I'm going to do? Let's bring her image. For anybody who's like, I don't want to look at these kites. Let me see her painting. So let's see if we can do best of both worlds here. So possible images. I always remember these when I was a kid. Okay, so I just think it's kind of fun to kind of look at a number of different kinds of kites. So red kite, and obviously these kites, you want them to be generally kind of blowing in the same kind of direction, right? There's a triangle. Let's go for diamond shape. How are we going to do one? Ooh, I like that. So I'm taking a little bit of liberties. Oh, you can't see my... what am I doing here? Michael. Here we go. This is what I'm up to. Making a few little changes from her painting, just because, again, I'm not as confident in my own ability to pull off those kites in the sky as she did, so wanted a little bit more structure for mine. There's one of my students from Emily Carr. Shamsa is watching here. Nice to see you, Shamsa. And Peter says, this painting got really interesting and fun, putting the colors randomly into the crowd. Right, so this painting, which I imagine this is probably going to be one of the least viewed episodes that we do, just because it's she's not as famous as many of the other artists we've talked about so far, even though I think she's clearly a great artist. But I think some people are like, oh, this looks like a child's painting or whatever. But I think this has been one of the funner paintings to work on. And I think it really shows you that you could be doing some of this, you know, if you wanted to go make a painting in your local park, you could do something very similar to this, and just by making kind of very basic shaped people, right? They don't have to all be fully articulated, complex characters. You could keep them kind of simple and pull it off and leave feeling pretty satisfied with what you've got. I'm going to do a couple other ones here in the sky. Just a few more kites. I kind of like these up here. So I'm not sure exactly how I would pull something like that off at this scale, but I'm going to put this up here. I think I can outline that with some black afterwards. We got that color, so a bit of a greenish color. Do I want another? Maybe I'll put another little smaller green one over here. You know, I just don't have. I think her painting is gorgeous because of the speed and the simplicity that she did that. I find that I would find it really hard to live with it, but I can imagine some of you guys could pull that off too, who are faster painters than I am. Actually, I like this same color down here. Okay. What else? I think I want a bit more of just an actual yellow. So I'm just going to take, oops, it's still got lots of color on it. Let's see. It's going to be kind of an orangey yellow. Get a little bit of black on there. I like this colors need to be a little bit darker. Again, I want to create as much variety as possible. So we could spend quite a while working on this and having a little bit of fun, but I would say we're just over 2 hours now. You kind of want to limit yourself a little bit, otherwise you can kind of go a little bit nuts and just keep on painting on this and overwork it. Whereas I think part of, and this, I'm talking to myself while I'm doing this, because I could really get into the weeds here and just keep on going and going and going, and before you know it, you're like, I think I've overdone it. So I think I want to put like maybe a streamer coming off a couple of these things, and then that might be good. So this was the first one I did, and now it's, compared to these other ones, it looks a little bit sloppy, which drives me nuts, right? So I need to do something there to touch that up. What can I do here? I think I could maybe put some white on there, maybe a little bit of white blue. Not sure about that, Michael. But you never know until you try it. Okay. I don't know. I'm not sure about some of these. Some of these moves have definitely been better than others. Okay, so, I realized I want to put a little bit of green back into the grass and clean things up too, so I want to get to that before I sign off. And I wanted to get this stripes. That feels nice. That really kind of feels like adds quite a lot. Just those couple little stripes on there. That kite. Oh my goodness. Oh, I got some water dripping from my camera above. Okay. There we go, some paint dripping. Which, if you get to it quick enough, you can... So I've got ice pack above. Okay, just got 1 second here while I leave that up here. I thought for a second I was spitting onto my... I'm like, wow, that's a big gob of spit I just unleashed onto my canvas. And then I forgot I got some... I just want to make sure it didn't get onto the camera. Okay. So what I was saying is this, or you can see it. Can I live? It's always a little bit of like, can I live with it? Part of me wants to change that. This kite. I don't know. I don't know offhand what I can do to fix that. Shamba says purple. Purple could work. Sure, let's take a little bit of purple. So I'm going to take my cool red and my cool blue. That's much better. There you go. When in doubt, listen to your students. Feel better about that. And maybe I want to take the same color and just make sure it's elsewhere in the picture. Actually, I feel like this works really well. I like this kind of purple. Thank you, Shamsa. Ooh, that's turned out really nice. Again, I want to be careful I don't overdo it, but I do like that color a lot. Okay, so last little bit. I mean, I could leave things like this, and I could be pretty happy with that result. Where's my... Alright, like, just on its own, I feel pretty happy with this. So I could just walk away right now. I am, just for the sake of this picture, though, going to add a little bit of this green that she had. A little bit of a different color, kind of a green, which is always dangerous to right at the end of your painting, to start exploring other colors. But hey, you know, what I also think about this is I've done it once, and if I had to do it again, the chances are, I would say 90%. The likelihood that I'd make a better painting than this one if I was to do it again is like 9 out of 10 times I would do a better painting. So that is also somewhat reassuring if I'm about to do something and taking a bit of a risk. It's like, okay, if I mess this up and I want to do another one, well, the chances are it's going to be better than this one anyway. So what do I really, at the end of the day, have to lose by taking a bit of a risk here? So previously, for this green down here, we used, if I recall, the warm, everything, my colors are all mixed up, but I had, where am I used the warm yellow, the warm blue, and cool blue. Right, so I actually used a little bit more of the warm yellow and cool blue, although I had a bit of warm blue in there anyway. So primarily, oops, let me get these. So I used these two to kind of mix this up. There was a little bit of the cool blue or warm blue in there, right? So I want something a little bit more, that's got a bit more pep and pop to it. So I can use this same warm yellow. Use this same cool blue, but this time I'm probably not going to dilute it much, right? Because before I diluted it with some of the cool blue, or the warm blue, sorry, I keep saying that. By the end of these sessions, my brain starts to kind of melt a little bit, so forgive me. So let's just see. Got this in the background here, so I'm going to come out here and just kind of do a little bit of touching up. And not in everywhere. I'm not going to go around the whole thing. Let's bring this back here. And I think I'm just going to extend her painting back up top here. And I'm also using a bit of a dry brush technique. And a dry brush technique is exactly what it sounds. I let my brush get dry. I'm kind of rubbing some of the paint off until, and that is one way of sort of blending the paint out a little bit. And integrating that paint back into the rest of the picture. So the purpose of this last little bit of paint that I'm putting on here is also to kind of add a little bit more variation into the ground that all these people are standing on. Right? Because like any kind of grass, you know, there's some parts that are, oops, there's some color that I just mixed out onto the surface there. Like any patch of grass, there's parts of it that are going to be healthier than others. And so it's just kind of giving a little bit more variety in here. So I smudged a bit of this paint. I'm just going to integrate that in there. And of course, you can also use this as an opportunity to clean up any part of the picture that, you know, you weren't happy with. You know, if there's legs that look all kind of awkward or weird, you can go in there and use the paint to deal with that. Now I'm just going to take a bit of the cool yellow and mix this in here. So again, I'm using the different paints without mixing new paint, so I can keep my brush kind of dirty. And first of all, it's just kind of a little, saves me some time, but it also helps integrate the colors that I have together, right? So because there's that previous color in this color a little bit, as I mix it around, it's not like totally radically different, because I was using some of that color already, which was on the brush. Okay. So I'm almost done here. If you've enjoyed this class or any of the other ones and you found it helpful, I am always very appreciative of any donation, large or small, through PayPal. And the link to the PayPal is in the video description below. And many of you have been very, very generous. So I sincerely appreciate that. I've also had donations as little as $1, and I appreciate that. I know some people think, oh, I don't have a lot of money. It would be embarrassing to send a small amount of money or something. If there's any of you out there who've ever done anything like this, you realize all those little tiny $1 add up to something at the end of the day. So, you know, there's hundreds of people that watch the channel, and if everybody gave $1, that would add up to a couple $100, right? So, but anyway, let me see. I feel like this needs a little bit of love down here, and then I can walk away feeling like I have done this painting some justice. Also, you know, if you don't have money or you don't want to use PayPal or anything, you can do your part by sharing the video with your friends and family on your Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, TikTok, or whatever else you want to use. That also helps bring more and more people to the channel, and that's sometimes just as useful as a financial contribution as well. So, okay, so I think, looking at it right now, that, oops, where's my painting? But that feels pretty good. I feel like I can live with this, and it's side by side. Again, I made a few little changes here. I'm still a little bit wondering about what I'm thinking about. I was going to maybe paint a little bit more white up here in the clouds. I don't know if I'm going to do that. Not that it shouldn't stop anybody else from doing that, but I want to turn this into a triangle down here. This is kind of, there we go. That feels something I was meaning to do for a while. Okay, so Donna says, I'm going to have a really hard time with this one as I am one to fuss and fart to get things right. I can understand that. I would say that this, if you're really into fussing, and that this might be one of the paintings where you can fuss with endlessly, and it's pretty hard to mess it up, right? If you're fussing around with these costumes and clothes and changing the colors and, you know, doing some stuff up here with the kites, the chances are that you're going to ruin it are pretty low. So if you do like fussing, but you get anxious about making a bad painting, this might be one of the ones that the stakes would be relatively low on, as opposed to some of the other ones where if you really get into the fussing and fighting, you can really drive it right off the cliff. Deborah says, an art teacher that I had once told me to paint what I see, not what it is. She said, just to trust our eyes. That's great. Great advice. That was a good teacher. Because just like I was mentioning off the top about photography, right? I don't want to know, I can take a photograph. I don't want to personally make a painting that looks like a photograph, because otherwise why go to all of that trouble? I'd much rather, especially when I'm looking at other people's artwork, I want to see what they see, not what their cell phone sees. I want to see how they are processing reality. That's the most interesting thing when we're looking at Molly Bobak's her illustrations while she's away at war. You know, there was cameras back then and people took photographs of it. So the pleasure of seeing those is how she, you know, took that information, crunched it around inside of her mind and spat it out through her fingertips, right? That's what I want to see. I want to see her view of things. Deborah says, she tends to be an impressionist painter. That gives me freedom to make mistakes. You know, people talk a lot about Bob Ross and his, like, happy mistakes or happy accidents. He was, I think, bang on with that whole concept of the freedom to make mistakes. And most of the time, especially when you're making art and you make mistakes, you're opening doors for yourself, that you're doing things that you would, by definition, not have allowed yourself to do before, right? And all of a sudden it's there, and part of that happy accident is embracing what you've created and just running with it, right? And it's like, oh, you know, there's been a few times, like, just off the top of my head, I remember when we were painting the Frida Kahlo and I dropped my brush in the middle of the painting, and it's like, okay, that's going to be where a watermelon seed is going to go, because, and now that I look at it, I can't it's almost bizarre to me that I was going to leave that part of the painting empty. Now that I look at it, like that would just be this glaring problem, and I solved it by dropping my paintbrush accidentally right into the middle of the painting. Right, so that's an example of how an accident can actually, set you off into finding the solution. Anyway, I could go on and on about all this. I love talking about accidents and failure, etc. So, let's see here. Oh, I got to do my... I want to sign the back of my painting here. So... my goodness, I can't believe that I'm writing the 24th of November already. This is the Great Kite Festival. Okay. And just like that, another painting is complete. So, thank you everybody for tuning in and watching another one of these episodes and for painting along. As a reminder, on Saturday, this Saturday night, I'm going to talk about paintings 11 through 21 or whatever. So from Morandi to Warhol, we'll talk about all the artwork that you guys sent in. And I've had tons of paintings that you guys have sent flowing in over the past few days since we did our last meeting on last Saturday. So I'm really excited to see all the new ones that you guys have done and to be able to give you guys feedback on your artwork and hopefully help you make them better or to see where improvements can be made, and also just to celebrate your achievements. Very few of them need anything to make them better because you guys have done such a great job. And what makes me also really excited is how you guys are often exceeding my paintings. How you're taking what I'm doing, you're like, yeah, you know what, I've got an idea, I'm going to change the background. Right? So maybe there's some of you out there who've got a sunset version of your painting, or maybe drones flying in the sky here, or space aliens about to land on here, or very well socially distanced folk in the on the grass. Who knows? I can't wait to see what you guys have done. So until then, on Thursday we're doing a painting by one of the most famous Canadian artists of all time, Lauren Harris. He was a member of the Group of Seven. And I think probably his paintings, I think, hold the highest, they're the most expensive paintings sold at auction in Canadian history. Steve Martin is a big fan. The comedian Steve Martin is a huge fan of Lauren Harris's artwork. So that's going to be a lot of fun, is to explore that artist and to make one of his iconic mountain scenes. So I'm really excited about that because that's when I started doing these. I'm like, that would be one of the artists that would be a lot of fun to paint. So we'll see you in a couple of days, and send me your artwork so that we can look at them on Saturday. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody, and we will see you then.